So my name's Simon from a company called Jerba Campervans. We were formed in 2006, and just a quick bit of shameless publicity, we transport a VW Transporter T5s. That's the mainstay of the business. We do 45 to 50 vehicles a year. We're one of VW's approved suppliers of what they call their Motorhome SE vehicle. We have customers throughout the UK. I'm talking to you today about type approval. This is European legislation which came in 2012, and my specific area is the van size vehicle. So we're talking, that is the Volkswagen Transporter T5. So it's the small vans, it's not the coach-built vehicles which Philippa was talking about, it's the smaller vans. Legislation for this particular area is less than 3.5 tonnes. So if you had a van on its own, just a van to start with, it's about 2 tonnes. When you convert it, you roughly put another half a tonne on it, so your vehicle on the road is about 2.5 tonnes. So we're obviously well under the 3.5 tonne limit. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. First one is, what is type approval? Second, what does it mean to converters and companies like Jerba Campervans? And lastly, as consumers, what should people be asking when they go to look at buying a van? Well, type approval covers every vehicle on the road. Unless it's a kit car, it's complicated when you get into sort of the smaller series vehicles. But for your mainstay vehicles you see on the road every day, so your Fords and your Volvos and your BMWs, whatever they are, every car out there, every van out there has what's called type approval. And type approval is all about safety. So it's measuring anything from your braking systems, to your steering, to the glass in the windows, to your safety belts, to your seat mounting points, everything. And I mentioned before 2012 being a date, April last year, motor caravans used to be exempt. When I say exempt is when we take a van from VW, it comes out of the factory, VW have already type approved the vehicle. You could drive it out the factory door, drive it down the road, everything on the van is already safe. They've done everything for the brakes, the steering, and the whole vehicle is ready to go. But what do we do as converters? We take cutting equipment to it and we chop the roof out. We put an elevating roof on it. We might take the front seats of the vehicle, we might put what's called a swivel plate on. So you take off the seat, you've got a metal base box which has come from the factory. You put a plate in which enables the seat to swivel, and you put the seat back on again. You've clearly modified the vehicle. The seat belt you buckle into will still be part of that seat, so that part could be an untested part. We might put a heating system in, so we have to take the fuel tank off and we put a new fuel line into the tank, but who's to say that the fitting we've put in is actually secure and safe? Tanks are pressurised. So when they're pressurised in a testing situation, if you had an accident in your vehicle, the fuel doesn't leak out. So as a company, we've been through all the testing sides. You put seats in the back. Most campervans, motor caravans will have a seat in the back with 2 or 3 seat belts on, not put in by the factory, but put in by the converter. So it's all about saying these adaptations that have been made by the campervan converters, are they safe? When it comes down to it, it's only though about new registrations. So if I've got a van which is already running around on the road, it's registered, I've got a tax disc in the window, if I then want to, as a company, convert that van, the new legislation doesn't touch it. So I can convert it and you could buy it as a customer, you can drive away. The only legislation that covers what I'm doing to that vehicle is what's called general construction and use, which is for everything you see around you. It's not specific to vehicles. So type approval at the moment is just about new vehicles. So when a new vehicle is taken out, before you first register it and get your tax disc and get the DVLA to send you your V5, it's at that point that the type approval comes in. So what does it mean to converters like ourselves? Seats, talked about seats. Seat belts. Seat belts must be approved seat belts in those positions. Headrests. You don't have to have headrests on the seat of the back of a camper van, but if you do, and you're registering your van as a motor caravan under type approval, those headrests must be tested. There's a thing called a pendulum headrest test, where the headrest is put up, there is pressure put against the headrest to ensure it passes the legislation, and you have to do those tests. I talked about swivel plates. Electrics, there's 61 different categories that fall under the legislation, and you sit down with somebody from the Vehicle Certification Agency, which is the government body, and they say, well, which of these 61 do you affect when you start converting the van? And one by one, you look at them all, and we affected about 15. So we had to then prove that what we had done was maintaining the standard which they obviously have for ensuring the vehicles are safe. So as a converter, you've got two main choices. The gold standard of choice is what's called European whole vehicle type approval. So that is testing to the same level as if, again, you have your Ford or your BMW or Volvo, whatever it is. Major manufacturers all test to that level. It's assessed by the government agency, the VCA, and it involves full testing of the vehicle. So, and I'll show you a video in a second, it's not quite the same sort of video nasty as you saw from Philippa. It's what's called a static test. So you take the shell of a vehicle, so there's no engine, there's no wheels on it, there's no windows in it, it's literally just the shell. And we're testing specifically for this test the seats. So we put seats in the back. How do I know the seats are safe? We have to physically put them in the van, we have to fit them in the fittings that we have engineered in the seat, and then the shell goes onto a test rig, rather like you saw Millbrook. There's another firm we use called Status. These are all government appointed or government approved firms, and then they test the seats in that position to ensure they pass. Now in our case, you'll see in a minute a seat that's got 3 seat belts on. The 4, they've all got integrated belts, so the belts aren't coming off the bodywork, they're straight from the seat. For a 3-person seat, the amount of pressure with the system they put on it is 9 tons over 2.5 seconds. So it's a lot of pressure goes on the seat. And you have to ensure clearly that the fittings that you've used are up to scratch. If the seat comes out, you fail. If the seat bends too far and doesn't return to its position, you fail. Yeah? So it's all about ensuring that the standard of the fittings is actually going to do what is acceptable for the legislation. The other thing you have to do for European whole vehicle type approval is, as a firm, you have to have what's called quality systems. Now that basically means you have to be able to ensure that once you've passed the test, that you can replicate that same vehicle time and time and time again. It's no good turning up with a vehicle to a test, testing it and saying, well, that's great, it's passed, but having nothing in place to ensure that what they call it conformity of production. You've got to be able to prove that you can do the same thing again and again and again, otherwise the test in its own right is worthless. One of the ways is an international standard called 9001. It's common across the whole of systems for companies. It's not unique to what we do. It's systems to ensure that you can prove from the day Mr. Smith arrives and says, this is the van I'd like, please, and places his order, that you have a tracking system that goes all the way through to say, yes, these are the parts we order from Mr. Smith's van, this is how we put it together, this is what he received at the end. Yeah? So it's a systems-based sort of check. Once you've passed all of these, you get a certification to manufacture, and then you can manufacture as many vehicles as you like to that specification across the whole of Europe. And it's something that took us about 12 months to do. We passed it last October, and it cost us about somewhere between £25,000 to £30,000 to do everything, not including staff time. That's just in pure testing costs and other sort of billable bits that came into us. Okay, so Status was a testing company. What you'll see is, through a side door, the first shot is the seat. You don't have any seat belts on the seat for these tests. All the belts go off. It's a bare seat with no fancy fabric, and it's a bare shell. So we're actually looking through the side door, and all these chains here linked to the seat. There's 3 headrests. You can see the seat is being pulled forward, and it goes back again. The shot from the rear, which you'll see next, is a lot easier to understand. This is looking in the back of the van through the tailgate. So these are all the points they've linked into. The seat is pulled up. You see the van starts to bend and then goes back down. Now, the forces are such, and the vehicles are all designed, that the vehicles actually flex in an accident. So you saw it there, we'll just do it again. It's no good if the seat pulls forward and it's still at 45 degrees. That's clearly not going to pass. You can see the seat here, and as the tension goes on, there's this 9 tons of pressure. The seat comes forward, and then it flexes back. And then the same in the back here. At this point here is where the van is built to flex and down the bottom. So when the manufacturers build the van, and you see it bends out and it bends back in again. So that was done last October. That was a seat which had, say, 3 seat belts in. By engineering default, if a 3-seat pass with the plate system we engineered underneath, and a two-seater passes. So from this one test on a long wheelbase vehicle, we could then have a certificate which allows us to do 3 seats in the rear of a long, 2 seats in the rear of a long, 3 seats in the rear of a short, and 2 seats. So it allowed us to do a whole number of different layouts within one test. There is another choice for converters, and that's called an IVA, Individual Vehicle Assessment. You might see as you drive down a motorway, VOSA sometimes on the side of the road, often weighbridges for trucks and for motorhomes. There's no physical testing involved. If you convert a vehicle, so I convert a van, I take it to an IVA test with the VOSA testing team. They don't put it on a rig, they don't pull the seats. It's clearly a visual inspection. So yes, all the VOSA testing engineers have been through different courses, and they look, ballpoint pen, form, fill it out, everything is visual. Every single vehicle you do, so if I convert 50 vehicles a year, every single one of those 50 has to go to the test station and has to be looked at, even if it's identical. There's no need in the business for a quality system. You don't need to prove that what you did last time is what you can do next time. It has its benefits though. If you're a company that's doing a Renault Traffic, and then you're doing a T5, a VW, then you're doing a Mercedes Vito, and there's no way you would probably say it's worth taking each of these individual vehicles, putting a seat in them, testing them, because it's tens of thousands of pounds. Because the shot you saw before with the seat and the transporter VW will only be acceptable for that seat in that position in that shell. I couldn't just take that out and say, well, I can now use the same fitting kit in the Mercedes Vito, because the floor structure's different, everything's different. The seat might be the same, but how it fits to the floor is the key thing. So if you have a lot of different vehicles, an IVA is an option, but as consumers you should know that they haven't physically been tested. No one has actually tried to physically test the seat and see whether it does hold its position. So what should you ask? You're buying a van, how's the conversion been assessed under type approval? If it's been on the road for 5 years, no, it won't be. If it's been on the road for just over a year, it won't be. It doesn't have to be. If it has been, is it done under European whole vehicle, like we were just talking about there, or has it been done under the IVA scheme? Has it just had a visual inspection? If it's had a visual inspection, there'll be a certificate that accompanies that vehicle, so you should ask for that. If the company has European whole vehicle, they will have a certificate that says the following layouts are allowed to be manufactured by this company. And hopefully it's on the wall. If not, you should ask for it. One of the crucial things here is what it says on your V5, on your ownership document at the end of the day. If it says, say I took a van straight out of the factory and it was a panel van and I drove it down the road, my V5 and I registered it would say panel van. Yeah. If I was to not register it, take it, convert it to, under my certificate, the standard that says motor caravan, then when I register it with the DVLA, it will say motor caravan on your V5. So as a consumer, you can look at the V5 and say, does it say motor caravan? Does it say panel van? Does it say diesel car? Yeah, so the V5 is a critical part of it. Just a couple of things to finish off with. You often find people say to you on a stand, oh, this seat's crash tested, sir. Testing can take place in a van and outside of a van. You can test a seat on a bench test and it may well pass. That's fine, because you've got it strapped to a large piece of steel and you pull the back of the seat survives. Clearly, what you do with the seat and when you put the seat in the van, in the vehicle, is the crucial thing. The only way to be 100% sure is you know that a test like you saw there, that seat is done in that particular vehicle, in that particular position. So 2 things to remember. If the van's already on the road, basically, you don't have to have any type approval testing. You can buy a second-hand van, you can convert it, and there's no legislation under type approval which is going to check what you've done. The only way to be 100% sure is the European route. The video you saw before and the certification that comes with that. Thank you very much.